The CEO, we like to say, really is the chief energy officer.
Yep.
And it's real. Time is limited. There's only 168 hours, but energy is unlimited. And it's not fair, but you as the top leader set the pace.
This is the Business of Advice podcast, where we help good advisors become great business owners. Today, I'm excited to have an individual that has helped to change the way that we actually plan and approach our business here at Advisors Excel. In fact, over the last 2 years, I'm not sure there's anything that we've done that's been more impactful for our business than follow the guidance of my guest today. He's the founder of Entrepreneurial Organization, most widely known as EO now, the CEO of Scaling Up and the author of multiple best-selling books, including Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And I'm excited to have Verne Harnish on the Business of Advice podcast today. Welcome, Verne.
Cody, glad to be here with you for sure. And you got to tell them what you were doing just before this.
Well,
you were dressed up like, come on.
Man, I was just going to tell you that. Well, yeah, so we have this thing every year for Halloween where Dave or I, one of the owners, has to dress up in a costume that our staff picks. And I've rigged the contest every year to where Dave has always had to do it. And he's probably better at that. He's a little more outgoing probably than I am. But yeah, I just came off stage at our all-employee meeting dressed as the Tiger King, who I didn't even know who that was. But obviously it's some ridiculous character that I was dressed as. So it was fantastic.
And we all want to see that outfit. So you've got to promise to put that on one of the future podcasts.
I'm afraid all the pictures I saw being taken, it's going to be out there, unfortunately.
Yeah,
so,
sure.
And you were just on stage, actually, also at a regional kind of EO event. So excited, and I appreciate you taking the time to join me.
Of course, you got it.
So as we get started, and just to jump in, you've got a very neat background in business. You and I have kind of a Kansas connection that we learned of when you spoke for us this summer. But maybe just give me some commentary behind how you started down kind of this entrepreneur path, what led you to start Entrepreneurial Organization and Scaling Up, and just kind of your career.
Got it. Well, short of it is my grandparents each had their own companies. My dad's and a group of guys built a rocket ship of a firm called Higher Electronics. Then when I went off to college, I got involved with an HVAC company. We rode the Pizza Hut wave up, did all the HVAC for those guys. We took it to about 12 million. And then our business professor, Dr. Fran Jabera, the late Fran Jabera, wanted to launch a Center for Entrepreneurship. So he brought me on to help him scale that. We launched the Association of Collegiate Entrepreneurs. And then as a publicity stunt, we decided, let's identify the top 100 entrepreneurs under the age of 30. And the list was for 1984, then 1985. And just for fun trivia, number one on that list for 1985, the year he got fired, was Steve Jobs.
Wow.
By the way, number 4 was Bill Gates, both same age as Steve, yet Bill was 1/8 the revenue of Steve Jobs. Steve was 1.9 billion, Cody. People forget. This isn't market cap.
Yeah.
This is real revenue. Bill Gates was just a paltry 256 million. So anyway, but Steve had been fired from Apple. So long story short, I hosted his first public speech after being fired from Apple, had about 1,200 young and collegiate entrepreneurs in the audience, Bonaventure Hotel. And I had sitting up there with him, Michael Dell and Mark Cuban and Kevin Harrington, the Shark Tank judge with Mark, and Neil Balter, California Closets. And he came, gave the speech, and then he stayed that night, Cody, Steve Jobs, for our after party, but he stood in the corner by himself. And I remember leaning over to Greg Stem, the great treasure hunter, and I said, Greg, there needs to be an organization for Steve. And a buddy of mine, Joe Mancuso, had this line, it's okay to be independent, but no reason to be alone. And I thought, all right, there it is. And that really has been the impetus for EO ever since. Launched it in 87, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 35th anniversary, over 16,000 members now worldwide that are not alone.
It's very cool. So, and a lot of times I think as a entrepreneur, you can feel that way, right? It's you spoke for us this summer at our big event, and part of the reason we do so many of those is that exact reason. We actually just had one this week. I got back yesterday from it, and one of the things we talk about is just being able to come together with other like-minded entrepreneurs. In our case, like-minded financial advisors. There's just not a lot of great opportunities for them to come together and be able to talk to other people who understand some of the challenges that they're dealing with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's why it's so important to have community and a safe place where you can share some of the real challenges that you're facing, because often you can't share that with your friends. They're not going to understand.
Yep.
You don't want to share it all of it with your spouse and family. And so it gives a safe place for you to kind of talk it out.
That's really cool. And then what led you into kind of creating and developing the scaling up methodology?
Well, you and I were talking about it. So EO was nonprofit.
Yeah.
I never took a penny, never took a penny from it. And so the birth of my first child, it's like, you know what, I better get serious here. And so launched in 1997, what today is Scaling Up. And we're a couple hundred partners on 6 continents, helping about 2,500 clients in any one day. But it was really to continue the work that we were doing inside EO and this executive program I launched at MIT. And the thing that I saw was the issue is we were only educating the CEO. And we really needed to have a way to kind of help the rest of the team.
Yep.
And so that's what we do today. We coach the company, not just the CEO.
And I know I mentioned this in the introduction, but a little over 2 years ago, we started working with the scaling up kind of methodology, hired one of your coaches to help us implement that into our practice. So at a high level, maybe share with everyone, what is it about scaling up that helps to transform the way businesses approach their strategy?
Yeah, I think Scott Fuqua stated it best on the back of the book. You guys might know Scott with Atlassian. It's been one of the hottest stocks on the planet. They started in 2003. They came at 50 employees to the 2.5-day workshop, similar to what we're going to be hosting. And today, 5,700 employees, over $100 billion market cap. And Mike and Scott still own 72% of the company, which is so impressive. And Scott said it best. He said it really came down to both discipline and focus. It sounds trite, but the discipline around the meeting rhythms, the setting of priorities, the gathering of data that matters, and then the focus that drives both at the senior level all the way through, in his case, 6,000 employees worldwide, is what's key. And it's still, serving them well today.
It's one of the things that I noticed even as we implemented the strategy. As an entrepreneur, you never lack for opportunities or ideas typically. Yeah. And the more successful you become, typically, the more of those opportunities that present themselves. And just being able to narrow down and focus on what are the areas that we're really going to spend our time on that are going to move the needle. One of the questions I was going to ask, and Scott may be, the example of that, but just, are there any favorite stories you have of businesses or business owners or leaders that have implemented the scaling up strategy? Obviously, Scott's is a great one, but any others that come to mind?
Well, we've been lucky, Cody. We've got about 80,000 companies now. This will be my 40th year doing what I'm doing, that have implemented our tools. By the way, I want to mention one thing. I think your audience will appreciate it. Up at the MIT program, I every year hosted George Nader. George is the one who founded Boston Chicken. And he went on to do what was equivalent of KinderCare. And he'd always say one thing to kind of open up: you can't sit on 2 toilets. And it's a very graphic way to talk about just what you mentioned. We get bombarded by all these opportunities and priorities. And the challenge is, how do you choose? But you have to. And that's where the discipline comes in. But, if I were to pick one, it's why I featured Alan Rudy in the barriers chapter, that second chapter in the book. What gets in the way of scaling up? And, when I met him, he was running a company, out of Ohio, and he was working 80-hour weeks, and it was crushing it. That was the issue. And all of a sudden, he ended up a couple of his employees had a fight out in the parking lot. And he's like, what am I doing all this for? And that's when we came in to begin to coach him. And the cool thing is that we got it from about 80 hours a week to 8 hours a week. The time it took him to really work on the business so he could go out and then do the market-facing activities to scale it. He scaled it to 60 million, exited very successfully, took his next company to $1.2 billion using the same tools. And he's at it again with yet another company. And so we love it when the serial entrepreneurs continue to call up and say, Verne, I need a box of books. When can I get my team, to the workshop? And that's what's been satisfying, to see him do it over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think too, one thing I've seen is it helps not only as the owner or the leader of the organization, but to do that through multiple organizations like he's done requires you being able to build a team out around you. And I think that's what we've seen as we implemented a lot of the methodology. It's kept our entire team on the same page, right? Yeah. Everyone can look across our entire company and see what our 5 key priorities are for 2021. We're actually heading in next week to our planning for 2022 using this same process of what are going to be kind of our 5 big rocks that we focus on. So it's really helps not just the owner prioritize, but then make sure everyone on the team knows what those priorities are also.
Well, and the thing that really changed, Cody, from the first book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, which really was focused on execution, is we said, but there's some other things there. There's people issues that we've got to address. Obviously, you've got to get the strategy part of strategic planning correct. And then, you can get by with decent people, decent strategy, decent execution, but not a day without cash.
Yep.
And so we really needed to bring in some more robust tools around that part of the business as well. So that was really our evolution, was moving beyond just the execution phase, the discipline and focus, and really filling in that 100% solution that really address all the challenges that companies face.
So I was going to ask that question a little bit later down, but since you brought it up, I'll kind of jump ahead to that. So there is a framework, with scaling up called the 4 decisions, which you just mentioned are, a company needs to focus on the people and the culture, the strategy, the execution, and cash. How, as a business owner, and I'm even trying to think back a little bit to when we started this, but how would a business owner kind of analyze where they're good, where they're bad in each of those areas, and any just suggestions on how to go about, like, how are you with people and culture? How are you with strategy? Any thoughts around that?
Well, we partnered with the largest survey company in the world, and we said, let's put together a really robust assessment. And so all of our coaching partners have that. It puts out a 20-page detailed analysis in each one of those 4 areas. And all of those who come to our CEO bootcamp will go through that and get that assessment. And so we decided, let's not mess around. Let's actually get in and measure it and give everyone a specific report of how they're doing in each one of those areas.
And one of the things that you talk about in the book, and it does provide, so if people want to go buy the book, Scaling Up, there's some great tools that they can tailor into how to use the Scaling Up methodology. But are there 2 to 3 tools that you think are maybe the most valuable, that have had the biggest impact?
Yeah, that's like having you choose which are your children, is your favorite. But to start out with, we've got a people tool called the FACE tool, Function Accountability Chart. Look, if you get the right team around you, your life is great. If you don't, your life is not so great. And Jim Collins said you got to get the right butts in the right seats, but he didn't really give us a list of seats. So we put that list together, and we've got some flexibility to add if, depending on the business. And we take the leader down through that to make sure that first you're in the right position. Look, Steve Jobs, even though he had the title ICEO, he really led marketing.
Yep.
Tim Cook kind of led everything else. So let's get clear about your role and everyone else's. Then around strategy, we have this 1-page vision summary. And look, our view is if you can't state strategy simply, it's going to be a lot harder for your team to actually execute on it. And so this is a 1-page really definition of what that strategy is. And then execution, we're well known for this checklist of 10 habits. And the analogy I use there is the safest place to be on the planet is on a commercial aircraft. I mean, it's not as safe for you to walk across the street.
Yep.
And what drives that industry, they were the first industry to get serious about checklists. And if there is drama, and that's what you want to do is create a drama-free environment. If there is drama, they're like figuring out, what do we have to change on our checklist? And so, entrepreneurs, we're piloting our companies. And so we thought, here's the checklist that you can go down through. So we've got those 3 pages, one around people, one around strategy, and one around execution. And then we have, I think, a really good one called Power of One around cash. So if you'd let me choose 4, those would be
I'll give you 4.
Several we've got.
Perfect. One of the other things that's talked about a lot in the book that I know we kind of changed the way we look at it is your kind of KPIs or key performance indicators. So that's a big topic in the book. I think it's a big topic that we tend to talk to the advisors that we support a lot, of trying to figure out what they should be tracking. There's leading or kind of lagging KPIs, or trailing, I think is how you describe it. But how would an entrepreneur go about figuring out or finding out what KPIs they should be measuring in their business? And then what would the balance, in your opinion, be between kind of these leading indicators versus these lagging or trailing indicators?
Yeah, it's a great point. And that's why we like to use the analogy of professional sports teams. And we love the book Moneyball. I think what's interesting is that was an industry, baseball, that measured everything. And they thought for sure they knew what they should actually recruit and hire and compensate based on. And then Billy Beane came along and said, maybe we ought to see if there's any correlation between that stat and the results we want, which is to actually win games and win pennants. And as everybody famously knows that's seen the book or read the book or seen the movie, read the book, it was on-base percentage. Mm-hmm. It wasn't what everybody thought it was. And so John Ratliff, our partner, had that in his call center business. And they measured 24 factors on a call doing mystery shopping. And they had this gold medal award that they would give in the industry. And John was part of actually setting those KPIs. And he was measuring the performance of each of his 24 call centers. And then he saw Moneyball. And he had one of those 2:00 in the morning, you wake up, oh my gosh, does any of those stats, and here's the key, you start with the result, the end in mind. What is the result we want? And then you've got to correlate. And you can literally do a quick, a regression analysis. Does that KPI really correlate to that result? So wait, long story short, they had these quality factors for all 24 locations. They said the result we're looking for is customer retention. In call centers, if you think employee retention's tough, customers is even worse.
Yep.
And he said, let's correlate that to these 24 things we've been measuring. And you know what happened, Cody? Not one correlated. In fact, his location that had the highest quality score had the lowest customer retention, and vice versa. And then there was a scatter diagram in between. By the way, you can hire somebody out of India to do this regression analysis, for $5 and on Fiverr. And what he then began looking for is what we call the Moneyball stat. And that's what you're talking about. Where is the thing that if we measure it, we know we get the results? For him, it was the net promoter score of his employees. I know it's crazy, but happy employees lead to happy customers.
Yep.
And when they started and they had to get that measurement right, they had even the wrong question they were asking. But when they got it right, now they had just the one stat. And so to me, the equivalent is, could everyone find the quarterback efficiency rating? That stat is proven to be quite accurate in predicting whether or not a team's going to win, the defense, how much it reduces the quarterback efficiency rating. And it's 5 KPIs into 4 ratios down to a unitless number. And that's what we help companies figure out, is their Moneyball or quarterback efficiency rating.
It's interesting. One of the things we've done over the last few years, kind of coming out of this, we created this kind of document or KPI indicator for our advisors. We call it I think it's called the greatest number. What we found is that one thing, and it's just proven out, is first appointment. Like, how many first new visits have you seen? And all the other things matter, right? Like anything, your conversion percentage, retention of clients, all those things matter. But the one that drives production the most, that's the easiest to see, is how many first appointments you've done. So if you want to double your business, we have this greatest number, shows you like how many first appointments do you do based on all your other key performance indicators. And that's a simple thing to do. So
that's awesome.
It's a really good tool to figure out what's that one thing. Yeah. You wrote another book where you talk about or compiled the 18 greatest, I'm going to call them greatest business decisions ever. So Eli Whitney and the cotton gin to Bill Gates and Microsoft. This may not be the right way to ask the question. I was going to ask, are there any common threads in the business success that are kind of true across time, technology, business, but was there any similarities that you saw in any of those businesses or anything that stands out?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think what was interesting is that there is none, that they're so different. And, we say that the key to any strategy is you've got to be different than everyone else. If you price the same way as everyone else, you're not different. If you deliver your product or service in the same way, you're not different. And this was an example of each one of these companies or individuals who chose to, in some case, do something radically different, both in their industry and in business in general. And obviously, in all these cases, we pick ones that were great because they turned out well.
Yep.
What's interesting is good artists borrow, great artists steal. And my view is, if you're an architectural, in the architecture business, why wouldn't you want to study like the 8 greatest buildings, that were architected? Here the same way, we're in business. And so we thought it might be useful to study these and again, steal a bunch of them. We've heard inside that Google's stolen almost every one of them, and why not?
Yeah.
So that was really what was in common, is there was nothing in common among those decisions.
Well, but one thing, so not directly related to the book, but I think it's just so important for any business owner. And I always say, as we've grown and scaled this business, I do everything I can to accelerate my learning. So if there's something I don't know, don't understand, I'm not good at, I'm going to go figure out, who can I spend time around? Who can I read about? Who can I listen to that is good at that? And that's maybe the big takeaway that I would have there is like, make sure you're learning and studying from other great business owners and business leaders.
Precisely.
Which you understand well. It's the whole, genesis of EO that you started. So I want to talk, you just released a new book that is called Scaling Up Compensation, which I think is a super timely book. We've made some big compensation changes even here in the last month based on what we're seeing in the marketplace, because I think the marketplace has been disrupted in a lot of ways, whether it's work from home or just, I've even said, I think there's this kind of global war for talent. We used to have to compete locally here in Kansas for the people. Now, we have to compete a little bit more nationally. But what are maybe some keys of thinking through compensation structure for an organization first? And then are there some common mistakes that you've seen organizations make, and maybe even more specifically and timely in the environment that we're in today?
Yeah, that's what I just came off stage speaking for an hour. We're not going to have that much time, but I think you want to start out by realizing that there's 2 fundamentals that underpin a great comp plan. First is it needs to be focused on not everybody internally, which is where the conversation tends to go, but on, is it incentivizing what the customer wants? And to the extent it's designed to reinforce that, then it's going to be effective. Number 2, you want to get it right and out of sight, because the least effect of compensation is to motivate people. Everyone thinks it's a motivation thing, but if you've hired right, you've hired motivated people. All that can happen with your comp plan, if you don't get it right, is demotivate, be this downer inside the organization. And then I think the third is, it's like pricing. I consider, Cody, compensation pricing internally. And the reason we get pricing and comps so wrong is that we're dealing with people, and people are not logical, they're psychological. And so you've got to really understand psychology in setting compensation, not just sit around and think it's rational. And rational thinking can get you in pretty quick trouble.
Are there any mistakes you're seeing people make right now?
Yeah, I think one of them is around individual carrots. Our third design principle is be easy on the individual carrots. So for instance, a client of ours, Gene Brown, who we've talked about, CityBin, he said, all right, I'm going to put together this kind of quarterly theme. And if we succeed, I'm going to take 40,000. And what he decided to do was spend 10 on a party, which went extremely well. But then he took the other 30 and he divided by 60 employees and gave each 500. He said, look, I'm never going to do that again, because that was enough to make a difference. But the problem was next quarter, they're wondering, all right, how are we going to get that again?
Yep.
And so the motivation effect lasts about a day and a half, if that. And then all it can do is become a downer if they don't get it the next time. So you've got to be really thoughtful in those kind of flash individual incentives that you put together. And you want to be, I think, in our view, gamify more that pot of gold that you might want to give out. Because the one industry that understands human psychology better than anybody else is the casino industry. They can get people to sit there all night. They can get the people to not want to take a break, and they're losing money. And so there's some aspects of that we can bring into our own comp plans.
Is there, on that is maybe a quick follow-up, any easy ways, and when you say gamify, is there anything that you've seen that is effective around that?
Yeah, I'll tell you a quick story. So there was a company, architectural steel firm up in Boston, 60 employees. It's not, you can do this at any scale. We did it at HSM with 2,500 employees. And the owner had about 60 grand he wanted to kind of give out in bonuses. But the reality was it was getting no bump in productivity. None of the KPIs were moving. It really became more of an entitlement program. So he said, here, let's do this instead. It's 5 grand a month, 60 grand for a year. Let's every month bring the team together. And if you hit your KPI, you get a chance in the wheel. And if you exceed it, you get 2 chances. And so we'd come together, and they would start out by dinners for 2, tickets to the movies, golf clubs, flat screens, TVs. Really exciting. You're not giving them cash, but you're giving them these kind of things to have fun with. And everyone can rib each other and celebrate. But then there was a 2 grand cash prize. And I remember the month I was there, he's doing it. It was one of the 4 guys in the warehouse that gets the 2 grand. Not only does he start jumping up and down screaming, but the other 3 guys do as well. And what did they decided independently? Hey, let's help each other hit our numbers. In fact, exceed our numbers. So we get 8 chances in the wheel. And if any of us get the 2 grand prize, we'll split it like we would lotto winnings. And I remember the owner saying, look, I could send those guys to a 12-week boot camp on teamwork, and they wouldn't have accomplished what they did with this, having fun with this pot of gold used a different way. It's intermittent reinforcement and the surprise of not knowing if you're going to win the car or whatever that makes it exciting.
Yeah.
So take those marginal dollars and have some fun with it.
That's cool. One of the questions I wanted to ask and just get your thoughts, a lot of the advisors we work with, are now building an organization where they have multiple advisors working for them also. Oftentimes they are on some sort of commission structure, so it's a percentage of what they bring in. Are there any considerations to be given, or any way to approach that in a different way when you have people who are on kind of a variable compensation plan?
Yeah, one of the examples we give in the book is Egon Zehnder. They're one of the top executive search firms in the world, 80 offices, founded in 1964. And what they realized, if you start with the customer, what does the customer want? They want the best candidate you can find anywhere on the planet. The problem is that's an industry that's highly driven by commission. I mean, if you place that candidate, then you as the person who placed them is going to get a huge payoff, and your office is going to get a huge payoff. The problem is offices and individuals would hoard candidates, right? And that's counter to what it is that the customer wants. So at Egon Zehnder, look, everybody's well compensated. And then there's a huge bonus pool at the end of the year that is split evenly across the 80 offices. And it's a significant amount of money that is a pooled, if you would, commission that would come off the fees that you're getting for doing the executive placement. The only variability to it is length of tenure. Because the other thing that the client wants is, I don't want a different executive search person that I have to deal with each year because they keep leaving your company or moving on. They like to kid that their executive search partner assigned to that Fortune 500 company probably has got the longest tenure of anybody, even in the Fortune 500 company, because their incentive plan is designed for people to stay 30 years with the same company so they get to know them well, and they then share and support each other across the 80 offices to find that company the best candidate. Now, here's one of the keys that, though, is important in the book. The number one principle is you have to be different. And so the worst thing you could do is hear about another company's comp plan that they're raving about and say, all right, we're just going to take it and install it. No. The key is to be different. And that's the key to strategy, as it is your compensation strategy.
That's really good. I think a lot of ways I could see some of our advisors being able to apply that to how they have multiple advisors within the firm. This is an off-the-wall question that I didn't even send you in advance, but yesterday you hosted an event, kind of a virtual, that I was able to tune in a little, but you had Liz Wiseman on there, and I just bought her book on impact players. Are there, right now I think so many people are trying to find great teammates. Is there anything, I know you've known Liz and have recommended her a lot, but anything in her new book or from what she talked about that's jumped out to you on just how to find and develop impact players on a team?
She didn't talk so much about how to find them, as much as how to, describe them and how to support them in the company. But the thing that we've been talking about that parallels it is the importance of finding a strange fishing hole from which to fish. You need to find a consistent pool of talent, especially if it's different than where everybody else is looking for talent. So for instance, we've got a client down in Florida, and we know the number one thing I need to hire for is will, right? You can't, and by the way, that's very hard to train. Somebody either has the will to succeed, the will to learn, the will to really do a great job, or not. And so he went to the University of Michigan. And he found out that the University of Michigan's athletic department has a placement office. And he goes, I know one thing, student athletes, by definition, discipline, having to get up early, work out,
like
face
to compete.
Right, compete, all of that. And he said that's become his strange fishing hole. Mine, by the way, is Marriott. Almost all my employees I have hired from Marriott, because they have a great culture of service and honesty and integrity and all of that we know Marriott's for. And that's been a great fishing hole for us. We've got a client who had retail carpet stores. And the problem is poaching inside your own industry. First, you have to not only train them, you have to untrain them, right? And then retrain them in your way. And they come in with all these preconceived notions. That's why Toyota will hire nobody who's been in the auto industry before. And she honestly couldn't pay him anymore. So we helped her find an adjacent industry, the shoe industry, where top shoe salespeople make about half what a top carpet salesperson is. So that's where she drew her talent from. And she would run ads there, say, would you like to make twice what you're making now? Give us a call. Oh, it's carpet. But if you got great sales skills, it can port over to almost any industry that's related. This happened to be both retail, which is why it was close. So the key is to find a strange fishing hole from which you can really draw a consistent amount of talent to scale up.
I hadn't thought about it in that way, but we have an advisor who's had a lot of success hiring people that have been in development roles at universities. So, right, it could be an athletic director, like a fundraising role, or, some of the different business schools, because they tend to know a lot of, people with money. They're pretty used to being able to talk to people about money. A lot of times they have to travel a ton. They're not paid extremely well. And so they end up making really, really good financial advisors. And he's hired quite a few that have been in roles like that. And I wouldn't have thought of that until you just said, like, there are some strange fishing holes out there that would be really good to pull from.
Well, and Cody, you guys do too. When you and I were talking, you guys have got some great fishing holes there in Topeka that you have consciously nurtured in order to find the talent.
That's good. One question I want to ask you, because you get to spend so much time with other entrepreneurs and business leaders and are around them constantly, but kind of, let's say, post-pandemic. So hopefully we're entering this post-pandemic phase. But what do you think are going to be the biggest things that entrepreneurs have to, or business leaders have to be paying attention to and have to be addressing as we move forward?
Well, I've been sharing, to set that up, 3 quotes. First, from the great Roman philosopher Seneca, who said, "Don't stumble over something behind you." So, hey, whatever's behind you, leave it there. Number 2, the late Andy Grove then said, "More companies die from indigestion than starvation." And I think we're facing the roaring 20s if history repeats itself.
Yep.
I think things and all the demographics around the globe point to it, that we're going to see tremendous growth. Our GDP is up another 6 trillion over what it was in 2019. We're almost 3 times what it was in the year 2000. So what does that mean? Supply chain challenges, which we're seeing, talent challenges. It's going to be a shortage of everything. And that's why this indigestion could be more dangerous than lean times that some companies may have faced during the pandemic, which really leads to my 3rd quote. I've been going back to Vince Lombardi, who, I don't care if you're coming off a dozen winning seasons with the seniors returning, we start out by, this is a football. So it's about going back to these fundamentals, which is why we think they're more important than ever in go-go times as they were getting through the pandemic.
I remember, I think it was Darren Hardy that shared this one time. I've probably said it a few times on the podcast interviews I've done, but it's always stuck with me. He said, nothing leads to failure more than success, because as you start to have success, you stop doing all the little, you kind of relax and stop doing all the little things. This summer, I think this happened maybe right after you were with us in June. We took my son on some college visits. He's a junior in high school, and one of those was Baylor. We ended up at Baylor, and I know our good friend Greg Brenneman, mutual friend, is very involved. So he's the one who kind of steered me that direction. But when we went to Baylor, we got a chance through another friend I have to meet Scott Drew, who is their men's basketball coach. And so I asked him that very same question. I go, man, you're coming off winning the national championship. What are you going to do, and how are you going to approach that? I just wanted to hear what he was going to say. And there was a lot of the same thing, right? Of like, hey, we've got to remind the guys, like, what happened last year is done, and 3 of the people that were big contributors aren't there anymore. So here's the things that we did well, that lead us to that. But the other thing that I thought was fascinating, and it goes to maybe the theme of so much of what we've even talked about today, is he said, what I actually did? The first thing I did is I called Nick Saban, and I called Dabo Swinney, and I called Coach K. And, he's like, I just started reaching out to other people who had been through this and said, what do I need to know? And I think for any, entrepreneur right now, maybe more than any time before, being able to find some group of people that you can have as that support group to bounce ideas off is just going to be critical, because the pace of change that I think we're going to see is just going to continue to accelerate.
Well, and one of the things that we've learned, and the research backs it up, Cody, is you literally can't think your way through any of this stuff.
Yep.
If you're by yourself trying to sit there and think, all it's going to do is create more sleepless nights and turn your stomach even more. We're a being who 100,000 years ago developed language. We've only had written word 5,000 years. We've only had Excel spreadsheets for 35 years. So what do you think we're more highly evolved to do to survive and thrive?
Yep.
Stare at Excel spreadsheets or talk it out? And so we're a being that literally needs to talk it out. And that's why getting a group together, and I love what he did by calling up these other coaches. It was as much him speaking his concerns, his fears, his questions, putting it out there, as it was any of the advice or experience share that he received back was the real benefit.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that, but you're right? Like, even I asked him some of the advice he got, and I'm like, you probably knew that. It wasn't like, hey, make sure you're focusing on the fundamentals. Yep. You probably knew that, but just being able to talk that through and even reaffirm in your own mind a little, that's good. So maybe one final question I'll ask around that, because we have you coming in for a small group of our very top advisors. You're going to take them through your CEO boot camp, which is kind of a 4-day deep dive into, all the different challenges. Maybe just give, because I know you run some of these completely outside of us. You're doing this as a kind of a unique or special thing for us. Maybe talk people through, anyone that listens to this, if they're looking for something like this, what you do at your CEO boot camp, because I'm excited for it.
Well, what's nice is it's a small group so that we can get some really sharing of experience across the organization. Because whatever it is that I'm teaching, there's going to be somebody there who already has done it and can experience share. And that really locks in the ideas versus just getting it one-on-one.
Yeah.
And then, all the real stuff happens over the lunches, over the breakfast, the cocktail time and the like. And so it's those private one-on-one conversations where you've got, the time for us to really dig deep into your situation. We also find it's most helpful. And what I love is guys come out of it thinking, I went in thinking I could achieve this. I'm coming out now and I know I can achieve this. And that's when we know we've won. And it's a consistent thing.
I think, and I just value your input or advice or guidance for people who listen to this. One of the reasons we do so many live events, and you spoke at our one in the summer, we do about 6 kind of big events a year. So about every 2 months, we're bringing people together. There's definitely a value in the community and the like-mindedness and the new ideas. But one of the other things I tell people all the time, and just would love your thoughts on this, is I think the biggest benefit is everyone leaves there excited about their business again, right? So you're going through the day-to-day grind of growing and scaling and running the business, just being able to get away and get excited about it. Do you see, I guess maybe I would ask that as what do you see as the biggest benefit? Is it the new lessons learned? Is it getting excited? Is it the relationships you build? Any thoughts there?
Yes. But the CEO, we like to say, really is the chief energy officer.
Yep.
And it's real. Time is limited. There's only 168 hours, but energy's unlimited. And it's not fair, but you as the top leader set the pace. And to the extent that you've gotten a little burnt out and you've gotten de-energized, and that very topic is one of the first things that we discuss. And what we want to understand over those couple days is, what is the constraint that's got you at low energy? And what does it take for you to come back truly fired up? So Cody, you nailed it. It's coming back energized, and that becomes infectious within the organization. And if, look, your organization has slightly more energy it's bringing to the market than the competitor, it is a significant competitive advantage and not one to be underestimated. Teams, from conditioning to nutrition and all of that, no. And that's what's great about the Belichick teams.
Yep.
They win it in the fourth quarter because they still have their gas. There's still gas in the tank.
Yep.
And their whole strategy throughout that game is to drain everyone else's tank so they can pull it out in the fourth quarter. And that's why the energy thing is really important.
Well, it's interesting, even that Belichick, they've struggled maybe a little the last few years after losing Tom Brady. And if you watch Tom Brady play, man, he always has energy, right? He is fired up. He is a competitor, and you're seeing that. So I'm glad I asked you that question, because you articulated that so much better that's now how I'm going to start explaining it to people. So I appreciate that. So I had you on. I know you got to run because you're heading out to another city, but can I ask you a couple quick lightning round questions? These are questions that I say all the time. I may have asked you these when you were backstage with us, but so just quick answer thoughts that you have. First one, what lesson did you learn in, let's just say 2020, but kind of this past stretch, that you're going to carry forward for the rest of your business career or life?
That we all suffered PTSD. And Susan David said, pick 3 times during the day where you do something for yourself, because we tend to take care of self less. And so it's 3 15-minute periods. And hey, please don't judge me, Cody. I don't think I've shared this, but I love to play solitaire. So I'll just work really hard for 90 minutes and then give myself permission to play a couple of hands of solitaire. And guess what? And I let myself cheat. All right. So I win. I read all these books. I love to read People magazine as well. And that's one of my guilty little pleasures. And so it's giving myself permission to do those 2 or 3 things throughout the day in order to just give myself a gift, which
Yep.
we know is the reason Starbucks exists, is a chance for me to give myself a gift. And they know that psychology, and that's what we need to continue to do. And that really came to light in the pandemic for me.
Yeah, and I mean, just great advice for anyone to take away. I know for so many of the other entrepreneurs and leaders I was talking to, it's been a challenging last 18 months or so.
I know.
In some ways,
know.
it's been a lot of fun too,
Yeah.
because a lot of us are wired for the chaos of it all. But yeah, it's definitely a good reminder to take care of yourself also. What's the one thing that you think allowed you to graduate from being a good business owner to a great business owner?
Cody, I saw that question. I'm not there. They say you teach that which you need to learn the most. That's one of the things you can learn from when you're watching anybody on stage. You know that they're having that biggest issue themselves. So we've scaled, but I've got a new advisor. It's on a daily call with me. And it's like, why aren't I at $1 billion? I've got that value in our marketplace. Why haven't I achieved it yet? So I am about to learn, I hope.
Good.
And, T. Boone Pickens didn't make his first billion till he was in his 70s. So I still have a little bit of time, not much.
Well, and like he said, the first billion was the hardest. So once you get that out, then it's just going to take off. So
I am counting on that particular thing to happen as well.
What are you doing to drive you're so well known for the personal growth of other business leaders. What are you doing to drive your own personal growth this year that you're excited about?
Well, I set a personal KPI every year. And this year, it's deep sleep. I know it's so critical, tied back to creativity, and I'm cranking out a bunch of new work, including that new compensation book. And so I was running minutes. I've got my Aura ring, and I was running minutes of deep sleep. And now I've got it up on average in about 42 minutes. I want to get it up over an hour. And that's been my personal goal for this year, to drive my own personal performance.
So I know I said these were going to be quick lightning round questions, but are there any tricks or things that you've changed to help you sleep better? Because I think should be a great topic for every leader too.
The thing that affects it the most immediately is alcohol.
Yep.
And so I literally have stopped drinking alcohol, and it has been a significant change. So that's one. Obviously the screen thing, and making sure you've got that digital hour off before you go to sleep. And then and it comes from our functional medicine clinic, Reardon Clinic, that I'm vice chairman of, I have dramatically upped my melatonin intake, because that comes from the sun. And we used to be out in the sun 15 hours a day.
Yeah.
And we're not. And not only is that not getting us vitamin D, but it's not getting us melatonin as well.
Yep, those are good ones. One thing I've done, there's a technology called a chili pad, which is like a mattress cover pad, but it cools. So it runs water through these coils and cools your bed down. So I'll have my bed underneath my bed at like 55 degrees, which that's a good one too. That's helped me a ton. So
I'm at 65. I want to get it down to 65 degrees.
Yep.
And this tells me my body temperature and all of that. And if it's been too hot, I don't sleep well as well.
Melatonin also, I was listening to a Sean Stevenson podcast where it's showing some huge benefits in like COVID prevention and, even shortening the cycle of that too. So great supplement. I think every leader should be taking. Okay. Fourth question. And it can't be one of your own books, but what is the one book that you've recommended the most to other entrepreneurs?
Well, I'm going to share two. My favorite book this year, which is The Heart of Business by Hubert Joly. Hubert turned around Best Buy, took its stock from $11 to $110. That book, I've highlighted every page in it. But the overall book is the late Eli Goldratt's The Goal. It's a parable, one of the first books written as a parable, and it really teaches that at the end of the day, it's all about not the weakness, but the constraint. And if you can figure out what is the constraint between your own ears, which my advisors helped me do relative to getting to, a billion. Where's the constraint in your business model? Ultimately, where's the constraint in your industry? And to the extent that you can figure that out and get control your destiny around that, then it's critical. And that's why that book, The Goal, is so important.
Those are the Heart of Business I picked up. I saw you communicate or message about that. So it's in my stack. So it's probably two away from me jumping into that one. So
all right.
I've heard you talk a lot about it, excited about that. Okay, final question. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
To do a little retail business every day. And that came from the former co-chair of Goldman Sachs, John Whitehead. I had a chance to serve on a board with John. He went on to be Undersecretary of State for Reagan, and then he went on to redevelop downtown Lower Manhattan after 9/11, and then passed away. And he said that was the most important thing he learned. And what that meant is, as he was co-chair of Goldman, doing these big things every day, he would go down to the trading floor and he would put his radar up and get a sense that this trader just needed a pat on the back, a connection to the co-chair of Goldman, a little encouragement. He's Undersecretary of State. He instructed his staff, bring me one person or family every day, that is in trouble somewhere in the world, is an American citizen that could use my influence and help to get him out of that situation. And so I get bugged a lot, which I appreciate, hey, could you help me? And I've said, all right, I'm going to help one person every day. Set aside 30 minutes and just, help how I can. And it's been those that have given me kind of the most joy as, all the big stuff that we work on as business leaders.
That's cool. That's a great piece of advice that I haven't heard. And I would say today, like in doing this, you're going to help lots of people. So I don't know if that gives you, a free pass for a few days or not, but I do appreciate you taking the time to share just so much value with the business of advice community that we've been able to build. I always enjoy our time together. Maybe I'll say it this way. Where can listeners connect with you online? I would also love for you to plug that weekly email that you send out is just incredible. I've gotten so much value out of that. And then where's the best place for them to pick up all the different books that you've written?
Good. Well, first, Cody, I want to thank you for hosting this, for putting this information out to help people learn. And I want everybody to know you are great. Your team are great students of business. And that's one of the things we see. And so all the folks that are involved with you are lucky. Ours is very easy. We talk about owning a word or two in the minds of the market. So just go to scalingup.com. My email's easy, vern@scalingup.com. Send me a note and you just say, hey, I want to sign up for the weekly insights.
Yep.
You can go to scalingup.com and do it, but we make it easy. Send me an email, vern@scalingup.com, and we'll get you the weekly insights signed up. And that's where we got a whole bunch of other free tools and the like that are there in 23 languages, including Farsi. We just got the book in Farsi from Iran and the tools, and got a bunch of Iranian companies now using, even though we can't do business together. It's been a lot of fun. So scalingup.com.
And make sure you sign up for that weekly email or weekly insights. That's great. I look forward to it every Thursday, I think, right?
Yeah,
I feel like I just read it yesterday. So
yeah, you did. For sure.
One other thing I'd say is, we used one of your Scaling Up coaches, and you have a whole network of coaches that can guide people. What's the best way for someone, if they're interested in learning more, to connect with a coach?
So send an email to vern@scalingup.com. By the way, it comes right to me. This isn't like, answered by all these other folks. And I'll forward that and connect you to Ramona, who's over in our coaching organization. And she'll then, we've really refined the process to make it easy to match you to a coach. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, we'll get you a second. But
Sure.
We used to give you 3 options. And it's like, I don't have time for that. You guys help me get the right coach. And so we've got a process for doing that. It's pretty easy.
Awesome. I appreciate it. As I said, thank you for everyone. If you enjoyed this episode of the Business of Advice podcast, I'd love for you to leave us a review. Let other people know that it was valuable. Also, make sure you subscribe so anytime we have great thought leaders like Verne on, you're made aware of them. Verne, thank you, and safe travels as you head out today.
Bye, Cody.
See ya.